you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I ask leave of the House to move Amendment 1 and then 3 to 10 as circulated in my name together.
So shall I do it?
Leave is granted.
3 to 10 as circulated in my name. Let's be really clear. This legislation is hypocritical, deeply concerning. There is so much about this. This is Trump politics. Of course, what we're clearly seeing from this government is if you're a high-profile person and a minister from the government can get a photo opportunity, then we will show some leniency and some thoughtfulness and some compassion. Everybody else, we're shutting the gate and acting in a way that is, I can only say, despicable. This legislation is so hypocritical. It gives the power, sweeping new powers, to suspend the use of valid temporary visas for entire groups of people based on changing global circumstances. Now, I want to be really clear. The legislation does not define event. This can be, in this instance, a military conflict. In future, it could be a natural disaster. It could be a famine. It could be a political policy or a government inclination that the government of the day does not like. This event is not defined. So one of my first amendments is to define this event to be limited to military conflict, because what we know is this can be used in so many ways. And we have to be really clear when the Assistant Minister talks about that Australia wants to reserve the right of who comes and who stays and we don't want people overstaying. People have already jumped through hoops to get these temporary and visitor visas. These are students or workers or people who are coming for specific events to visit relatives, not immediately direct relatives, but relatives. It might be for funerals or weddings. These are significant events that people have absolutely jumped through procedural hoops. Let's be really clear. To get a visitor visa from Iran is not easy. The government makes it hard already. So to suggest now that all that effort is simply for nothing at the stroke of a pen from the view of the minister. And what this legislation allows for, the amendment allows, that the government can designate whole cohorts of visa holders from particular countries and prevent them from using lawfully granted visas. This is racist policy. Let's be really clear to call this what it is. And any government and future governments will have access to this legislation. This is not temporary legislation put in place with the current conflict. This will be ongoing and in the hands and can be used in so many ways. It's clearly targeted at Iranians today, but in the future it can be unfairly applied to any nationality, such as Lebanese or Palestinian temporary visa holders caught up in the current Middle East conflict. There's nothing restricting these unprecedented powers just to this conflict. So I'm shocked at the hypocrisy that is being shown by the government and so many of its members. It shows how much this system is simply broken. Why are we not hearing from Labor backbenchers to speak up about this legislation? How are you representing your multicultural communities? How are you giving them a vote, a voice? It shows that this system is simply broken and you are incapable of properly representing your communities. These amendments make sure that we restrict what kind of event can be contemplated for this. Of course, it also ensures that this is not indefinite. The legislation, there are no guardrails. The hypocrisy of the briefing I received and with my colleagues in relation to there being guardrails was staggering. There are no limitations on how many periods of 6 months can be instigated, which says it is an indefinite power to block people from coming on valid visas with no thought of compensation or anything. And the process speaks for itself. The rushed nature, the fact that surely you wouldn't want too much scrutiny when you're putting in place policies like this that are just copying Trump. It was with less than 1 hour's notice, no indication that there would be a rush through of the second debate, and that this legislation is just simply wrong. And if your communities know this, and so many of you of members of this House know that this legislation is wrong. We know that so many areas where ministers are granted indefinite discretionary power are dangerous. So the amendments that I'm moving are to make sure there is clear that they should be done by disallowable instruments to ensure that we have clear parliamentary scrutiny over these decisions. We need to have a review mechanism for affected individuals, and there is no sunset clause to this legislation to how long this extraordinary power could remain in place. It is such a dangerous precedent, and it is shameful that members in this place are not speaking up against this legislation. The fact that you can pause indefinitely these visas, even though someone might be in transit without any thought of compensation.
Member for Warringah, Minister, I'll call you in a minute, but I'll just get the member for Warringah just to clarify, because there's some contradiction between the amendments that you moved and what we've got. Just to clarify, the amendment that you had put forward.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I move Amendment 1 to 9 under the amended list circulated.
Okay.
I will move Amendment 10 separately.
Okay. The question is that the amendment be agreed to, and I call the Assistant Minister.
So I've got, just to clarify the paperwork, I've got circulated 1 to 10, so you moved 1 to 9. So the compensation scheme you're moving separately, is that? Okay, fine. Look, I'll just be very brief. I've responded, I think, to all of the arguments you put in previous amendments. I'll just make 2 points. Just to confirm, at the end of the crossbench briefing, we were very clear that we were moving. Yesterday, we said we were moving the bill in all stages through the House yesterday. That actually hasn't happened, because here we are this morning with the opportunity to put amendments, to debate amendments and to comment on the bill. I maintain the point, having said that we're moving it through the House, that with the exception of the member for Clark, who did not seek the call, people were not in the chamber yesterday, but here we are talking about the bill. Look, I'll just respond to one point very briefly. You made a number of colourful remarks about government members and multicultural communities. I represent the most multicultural part of Australia, actually, the city of Greater Dandenong. I'll just be very, very clear. I am absolutely confident that people in my community, and people in the Attorney-General's community, and people in the member for Holt's community and the member for Parramatta's community, when we sit down and explain the practical consequences of this bill, will overwhelmingly support it. Because the proposition that's being put really behind the nice, well-meaning sentiment and words from the crossbench amendments is that a random group of people from a given country who happen to have a temporary visa to Australia at this point in time, granted before major events changed or conflicts broke out, that random group of people who might be coming for business, tourism, a whole range of other temporary reasons, and may have no familial connection to Australia whatsoever, that random group of people somehow gets privileged in the humanitarian program and given the precious right to seek asylum onshore in Australia over people in my community and government members' communities who've been waiting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years trying to save their families. So I'm just not going to take the moral superiority, frankly, from people who overwhelmingly represent electorates with good Australians in them, but they're overwhelmingly not electorates where humanitarian migrants settle, whose community services don't get overwhelmed if we accept the kind of propositions which you're putting forward, and absolutely confident. I'm just responding to the point that you made in the debate. I'm absolutely confident that the people that I represent and that government members represent would support this legislation when they understand the practical consequences for their families and an orderly humanitarian migration program where our country is generous and we reserve the right to offer protection to the most vulnerable people out of an overwhelming caseload with the strongest connection to Australia.
I thank the Minister. Now, the question is that the amendments be agreed to. So I think I have to put that question first. Yep. You're seeking the call again. I call the member for Warringah.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. In relation to the member for Bruce's comments, I ask, has the minister or members of government consulted with, indicated to their communities that after going to great lengths and costs to have, for example, relatives come on visitor visas, or that they may be aware of others within their communities seeking to come on tourist visas or student visas, have they been indicated that at the stroke of a pen from actions occurring outside of Australia, not always linked to military conflict, it can be any kind of, there is no limitation in the legislation limiting it to military conflict. Are your multicultural communities aware that all those efforts of visas will be for nothing? That the government of the day can determine that a group of people is not welcome here to take effect of their visitor visas, their tourist visas, their student visas, their attendance here for work or funerals or other events. I think we have to be really clear about what the effect of this legislation is. This is not temporary legislation. This has no guardrails and no sunset clause. This is an indefinite opportunity for the government of the day to nominate an event occurring to then determine that anyone with a valid temporary visa for tourism, for students, for business, will not be able to exercise the right that they have paid for that visa and come for their communities. So many people in the multicultural communities know how important and hard it is for these temporary visitor visas to be obtained. To then impugn on them an assumption that they will automatically overstay or no longer return when they have already jumped through hoops to show their intention to return, that this is temporary. The government is absolutely conflating the issue of humanitarian visas and impacting, and by conflating that with temporary visas and this absolutely Trumpian amendment that has had no consultation. And with respect, if you really want to stand by this legislation, let it be tested in your communities with the full explanation and not just the gaslighting that we're seeing in this place.